Hello and welcome to everybody. It's so good to see you all. If you're new to the group, then welcome and lovely to see people that have been to Stronger Together get-togethers before. Wonderful to see everybody. So, a few weeks ago, it struck me whilst I was going through my plans and figures for the year, because I've got nice ambitious plans, that I need to be in flow a bit more frequently to achieve those plans and to do everything that I want to do this year. And it started me thinking, so why aren't I in flow more often? What can I do to be in flow more frequently and for longer? That wonderful feeling, isn't it just wonderful when you are in flow? Everything you touch turns to gold. Words come easily, whether it's written or spoken. Conversations turn into clients. Problems really genuinely are an opportunity to learn rather than we just sit there saying there's an opportunity to learn. And it's just a wonderful feeling. Everything is smoother, everything is lighter. And it's probably not possible to be in that state all the time, because then we take it for granted and then it wouldn't be a wonderful feeling. But wouldn't it be amazing to be in flow more frequently so that we can achieve more? And as the universe has a habit of doing, whilst I was thinking about this, in pops an email from the lovely Melanie, who I've known for quite a few years now. So we hopped on a call and we were so aligned. It was wonderful, really, really wonderful. And I know a lot of business owners feel this way. So I thought, what's a brilliant opportunity to have Melanie, a occupational psychologist, come and talk to us and help us really identify what our optimum performance is, what flow is for us, and then identify what gets in the way, and then to share her wonderful knowledge about how we can navigate what gets in the way. So I'm absolutely delighted that she's here with us today. 30 years experience. Melanie, for those of you who don't know her, is a chartered occupational psychologist, an NLP practitioner, an MBTI master practitioner, and she's here to help us today elevate our business performance. So welcome, Melanie.
Thank you, Julia. And thank you so much for asking me along to give this talk. I want it to be as interactive as possible. And so we're using polls, and please feel free to put comments or questions in the chat box. And Julia, if you could kind of keep an eye on that and just feed in anything. And I want this to be practical. And so I am going to ask you at the end is in terms of what are you going to do in the next 24 hours? What actions you're going to put into practice. So just a little bit, because not all of you, I haven't met you all before. So I'm Melanie Green. I run my own business, Inspire Transformation. I've been doing that actually for 33 years now. And I was thinking just before that, when I set up my business, it was before there was the internet or email or mobile phones. And actually the world of work was a lot easier and a lot simpler. And as an occupational psychologist, is also the world of psychology has changed a lot in that time. And what I do has changed radically. And I feel passionately about practicing what I preach. And the reason I became an occupational psychologist, I thought, even at a very young age, when I was choosing about what to do, I thought, well, if you're unhappy at work, you're unhappy in life. And that seems pretty miserable to me, place to be. But actually, I was quite a miserable person. I was known as Moody, Miserable Melanie. And I was definitely ruled by my inner critic. I've since mastered my inner critic, written a book about it, more about that later. And there's kind of two main areas that I work in that relate to this idea about optimal performance and elevating your business performance. So the two areas I work in is one is around personal resilience and how do we really thrive in life and at work. And I was talking to one client who said, like, I'm coaching her because she's very stressed. And she said, well, I've got to the point where I'm not crying at the end of each day. And I said, well, that's great that you've got to from cry to survive, but I'd like you to thrive. Um, that's where we really are aiming for. And the other area that I work in is around effective communication and teamwork. And of course, how we are on the inside greatly affects how we communicate and work with other people. And so, in terms of elevating your business performance, it's particularly if you're running your own business, whether it's either just you on your own, or you've got a small team, or you've got business partners, is that it starts with you as a human being and what is going on up here. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today, so that you're firing on all cylinders. And as Julia talked about, it's about being in that state of flow, being in the right zone, and I'll talk more about that later. So what we're going to cover today is this idea about business performance is down to your personal performance. We're going to do a little poll about what stops you from thriving in work and in life. Then I'm going to share a model about the zone of optimal performance and how do you get into and stay in that zone, where you focus your attention to help you to be in that zone, how to understand about the brain's threat response and dampen that response down, and a bit about managing your mind, mood, and behavior, and get you thinking about actions to take in the next 24 hours and beyond. And so a lot to kind of cram in. But obviously I'm going to kind of go fairly surface rather than dig deep. But you can feel free to ask questions and also email me afterwards, and I can point you in the directions of more detailed information. So I'd like to do a poll and about what stops you from thriving in life. And is what I'd like you to do is to choose your top three. Think about maybe the last kind of month or so. What have been the top three that might be getting in the way, or common things? You might go, well, actually, I'm thriving at the moment. Great. But what tends to get in the way of you uh, um, thriving in life? So if you can choose your top three.
Excellent answers coming in. I love polls. It's so exciting. It's like the elections when you see the barometer going.
The swingometer.
That's it, the swingometer, yeah. I remember once when it fell off. When you were saying the life before technology is so true. Excellent. So wonderful. 15 out of 18 people have completed it. That's 83%. If I end the poll, then we can 17 have now done it. 17 have now completed. It's 94%. Thank you so much, everybody. Excellent. So if we end the poll, that's wonderful. And then if we share the results, then everybody can see those results. So overwhelmingly is overwhelm in and out of work. And then we've got anxiety with second to that, lack of balance between work, home life, social life, then finding it hard to ask for support or help. So true. And then after that, not enough sleep and a level with anxiety.
And I think there's probably a big balance or link between that lack of balance and particularly self-care, and then the overwhelm as well.
Absolutely.
And I think that overwhelm kind of in and outside of work is that you might have a lot of other things going on outside of work. You might have young children, elderly parents, who knows, you might have your own health issues going on, and how that affects your ability to really thrive. So can we close the poll now? So thank you. So what I want to do is to look at this idea of the zone of optimal performance and to share a model to describe it. And I often find that when I'm talking to people about this and about stress management, is you get some people saying, yes, Melanie, but stress is good for you. It keeps you on your toes. And actually, this model shows that a certain level of pressure is very good for you rather than necessarily stress. So let's have a look at the model. So what it says is that if we have not enough demand on us and not enough pressure, we can feel really understimulated, demotivated, bored. I have one client who, and you can be actually very busy, but you could do it in your sleep. And I have one client who sometimes is down in this level. Is yes, she's busy, but she's somebody actually who thrives on starting new projects. And it's when it gets to the bit where, oh, now I've got to do it. Not necessarily that completer finisher, and can end up in that low zone. So that's not a good place. As the demands increase and the pressures increase, we get to this zone of optimal performance where we feel really energized, we're motivated, we're stretched, but when we're not strained, we're excited by what we've got ahead of us. And we end our days where we feel, we've worked hard, but we're not exhausted. And we're not exhausted at the weekend. So we still got energy to be able to exercise and to look after ourselves and socialize and do whatever it is that you want to do. And this zone of optimal performance is it will be different how large it is for each person and also at different periods in your life. And what if you're up near the top of the zone of optimal performance, it doesn't take much to tip you over. So when once we're tipped over, that's where we become stressed and we're overwhelmed. The brain's threat response goes into gets triggered, and I'll talk more about that later. And we're feeling strained. And I realized that once I started learning about all of this, is that actually, particularly about the neuroscience in our brain, is I realized that when I was younger, I was in low level threat response most of the time. And not surprisingly, I didn't sleep well. And I was very anxious about things, feeling overwhelmed, and I was in that zone. Is that, but if you are in the zone, and we're going to do a little poll around this in a moment, but if you're in the zone of optimal performance, but you're right near the top, it doesn't take much to tip you over. So maybe a few sleepless nights, or somebody, child falls ill or partner falls ill, or if you do work in an office and you find on your journey to work, if you're here in Oxfordshire, is suddenly they decide for the next 18 months they're going to do major roadworks, and suddenly it's like, well, I was just about coping, but no, that's the final straw, and then you're into that overwhelm. So feel free to ask any questions. And Julia, I just wonder, can we do the poll? Because what I'd like to find out is actually over the last few weeks, where have you been in terms of, and it's just one answer. So where are you in the last few weeks? Which area are you in?
Excellent. The results coming in thick and fast. Yeah. Oh, the middle one at the moment in the zone. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So if I end the poll, share the results.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, in the zone. Yeah. Closely followed by demotivated, which is very closely followed by overwhelmed, stressed, and anxious. But isn't that wonderful?
And it is. And what's interesting, though, that's nearly 30% who are demotivated, flat bored. That's not an and in some ways, that and the overwhelm are not good places to
No,
be.
no. So
And
when you add
sometimes,
those two together, yeah.
yeah, and also when you feel really flat, is that it's often hard to get the energy to do something, which is where I think having a coach or I have an accountability buddy that I meet online every 2 weeks, is as well as my own coach, and having those sorts of things that can help to give us the impetus to get out of that demotivated zone or deal with the stress and the overwhelm. When I'm doing this in organizations, I have to say, sadly, is most of them are in overwhelm. There
Gosh.
might be a few in the demotivated, very
Mm,
few in the zone. And it's got worse since the pandemic. And all
mm,
my fellow coaches are also saying is that, there is just so much overwhelm in organizations.
mm.
And it is a real problem. So thank you for that.
Welcome. And it's really interesting and it's really relevant for business owners who are working with larger organizations to understand that the people that they're trying to connect with may well be in that overwhelmed state, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, definitely. And I've just looked at some of the comments, sometimes saying kind of, I can easily be in both on the same day. And I think that is interesting because sometimes people can start off in a good place. And I've had clients who kind of go, I start off and I'm in the zone of optimal performance, but after lunch, is that because they're exhausted, they're starting to feel overwhelmed. So then it's looking actually, how do you manage your energy levels so that you are in a good place? And I think, people are often about, I need to work harder and harder rather than actually go for a walk at lunchtime. And somebody said, daily early morning walk. I do that every day, regardless of the weather. Got on very wet over the last 12 months. Um, but actually, that sets me up for the day. And other people, putting in a lunchtime walk has really helped them to kind of re energize them for the rest of the day. Relocating to Wales in the next week and still maintaining business here. So that sounds really interesting. So let's move on to getting into and staying in that zone. So we've done the poll. So I want to draw upon a model from Stephen Covey's old book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And I use this model in a lot of organizations and with a lot of my clients. So the circle of concern or things that impact on us, but that we have no control over. So if we think, first of all, globally, is we had the pandemic, and then there's all these different wars and the energy crisis and the cost of living crisis, and uncertainty. Brexit happened and the impact that that might have had on your business. Is that kind of, if you work for an organization, there might be organizational issues that you have no control over. It may be in terms of that you've got your own health issues. I have my own ongoing health issues that I have to deal with. It might be other people's health issues that have an impact on your life. And the thing is, if we spend our energy thinking about or anxing about the things in our circle of concern, is we're just going to either end up really angry about things or very anxious about them or depressed about them. So when we focus on our circle of influence, we're focusing on, our thoughts, our belief, our mindset, how that affects our mood and our emotions, and then our behavior and our actions and how we communicate with others. This comes into, I was coaching a client this morning, and I coach her and her business partner, and they run a small business. And she was talking about one of her clients, and she said, I'm really worrying about one of my clients who are kind of mishandling their own business, and if we lose them, and there's all of this going on. So the coaching conversation was about, come back into your circle of influence. is, first of all, managing your fears so you can then have adult to adult conversations with your client. Because actually her fears were driving her kind of controlling parent. Clear that her client had a very strong rebellious child and was just then rebelling against anything she suggested. And so it's about starting with her managing herself, and that will help her to manage the interactions with her client. And so keep on coming back to your circle of influence. If you're starting to feel overwhelmed, anxious, etc., it's often because you're focusing on your circle of concern rather than your circle of influence. So let's talk a bit more about things you can do in your circle of influence. And I was thinking, first of all, to actually get you to think about and put this maybe in the just in the chat box, is how much of your thoughts and your conversations are about the circle of concern. So are you, I can get into great conversations about the state of the world or the government or whatever else is going on, or are you having conversations? Are you thinking about your circle of influence and what you're doing? So, like my accountability group partner and my coach is all about actually my circle of influence. So let's have some statistic here. Is it 80% circle concern, 20% circle of influence, or is it 50-50? What is it? Certainly in the past, I was 80-20. I think I'm more 20, maybe I'm 30-70 now, let's be honest. So where are you? Do you want to put some thoughts in? So somebody has got 80-20, so 70-30, so quite a lot. Still the circle of concern rather than circle of influence. Somebody there, 20-80, the other way around. And, if you're one of those people who ticked about feeling overwhelmed, is it might be about really coming into your circle of influence, because there can be so many things that are going on, in the world and in your own life that you can't control, but that can feel overwhelming. So coming into your circle of influence is really important. So, okay, so we've got a mixture here. So when family health issues come from nowhere, which, so often those sorts of things do come from nowhere, and it can often tip us over. And I think is that one of the things, I come from a very sick family. I'm following in that tradition. But what actually I have changed is, rather than being moody, miserable Melanie when I had much better life, like, health and things like that, is that I'm much better at finding the joy regardless of what's going on. In fact, I'm writing my second book, which is called Finding the Joy in the Shit. And I've become very good at doing that. So let's move on to what you can do to actually help you to be in looking at that circle of influence and also getting into that zone. So the first thing is about your brain. So your brain is designed to keep you safe. So it's very similar to the brain we had when we were cavemen and cavewomen. There's the reward response where you want to move towards something that's going to be good. So, when we were cavemen and cavewomen, it's like somebody has killed a saber-toothed tiger. Great, we're all going to eat for a week, so we move towards that. In more modern terms, says, I'm going on holiday next week, yay! So, that's the reward response. Even thinking about good things triggers that reward response. And we want to move towards it. It's a bit like, I was thinking about, if you were going to a networking event, I know some of the people on the call, you'll be seasoned networkers, you're perfectly confident walking in. But if you're not, and you walk into a group of strangers, but you see one person, you'll want to move towards that because that's a safe place. is let's go and speak to somebody I know. I can calm down before I go and speak to complete strangers. And the threat response is about actually, we need to move away from this. So there's the 5 F's of the threat response. So you probably will have heard there's the fight and flight, but there's also sometimes freeze, is that we just freeze. Is that you can either freeze when you're in the middle, say, of doing a presentation and you go into threat response because somebody has asked you a difficult question, or you're completely complete overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. And that's the freeze. The flop is actually very extreme situations when people are being physically attacked. So hopefully none of us will experience that. But the flop happens a lot in organizations. So when people, and sometimes in families and, and neighborhoods as well, but when people flock together. So, the company has just instituted a new policy and everyone's up in arms about it. And they all flock together and they're all gossiping about it and they're all making themselves feel even worse and getting even more angry. So the threat response has lots of different chemical reactions, what means that we're not in the best possible place to be able to think clearly. I don't have time to kind of go into it in depth, but one of the things about the threat response is that we can become tunnel visioned, is that because it was designed to either kind of stay and fight or run like mad, real kind of survival, is that everything kind of shuts down in terms of thinking more broadly, which of course, if you're thinking about your business, if you're in a business meeting and you go into threat response, you're not going to think creatively or broadly or be able to take on other people's ideas. So it's really going to affect your ability to function well and to communicate well if you're in threat response. And as I said, I would definitely felt that I was in low level threat response much of the time, when I was much younger and before I'd learned how to master what goes on in my head. And I have got it here. I have my little emotional thermometer that I use when I'm coaching clients, is that when when we're in threat response, and a lot of the time we're up here. So if something happens, so I don't know, maybe a client cancels a piece of work or gives you a kind of negative feedback, or a colleague is slightly, disagrees with you, it's very easy to go off the scale. Whereas if you are managing your mind and your mood on a regular basis, and you're down here, you may have a little blip, but it's very easy to dampen down that threat response. And I'm going to talk about some techniques to do that in a minute. So I think, it might be about, where are you emotionally on a regular basis? And I'm going to introduce in a moment a mood map as well to help you to monitor your moods. And so any, questions or thoughts about the threat response, please feel free to ask in the chat box. I don't know if there's, Julia, if there's any comments or thoughts at the moment.
Not at the moment. Just this is just so absorbing. It's wonderful, Melanie. Thank you.
So, right, okay. So, dampening down your threat response, you wouldn't necessarily have to do all of this. Is that just sometimes one or two, and you might have some things that you would do if you're on your own, others that you can do when you're with other people. One of the things is to get into and stay in the here and now. Is that I was reading a book, there's a great book by David Rock called Your Brain at Work. And it brings neuroscience in a very practical way, about neuroscience and how to apply it at work. And he quotes one neuroscientist who done some research, who said that 80% of the time we're in the thoughts in our head rather than in the here and now. So now, if those are happy thoughts, that's kind of okay, except if you need to be focusing on the person in front of you, or getting on with a piece of work. But too often, they're not happy thoughts. They're worries about the past or worries about the future. And so being able to um, come into the here and now. And one of the ways to do it is, it's not a technique I came up with, I read it in an article, but it's a well-known technique for controlling anxiety. It's the 5-4-3-2-1 exercise. And that is about to, first of all, is name 5 colors that you can see, 4 things that you can hear. And if you go quiet, you can hear your breathing. If you're like me, I have tinnitus. I can hear my tinnitus. I don't always hear it because I'm usually focused out there rather than in my head where it is. It could be about, oh, there's a car just gone past, but it's bringing you into the here and now. 3 things you can physically feel. So I can feel when I think about it, my bottom on my chair, my feet on the floor, my clothes. And then 2 things you can smell and 1 thing you can taste. And that brings you right into the here and now. And so I have got clients who are very, very anxious, which is why they've been referred to me. And they have found that doing this, and sometimes they set themselves reminders through the day, doing this regularly through the day is bringing down their emotional temperature. And controlling those anxious thoughts. So the other thing is obviously, is that if you're into the fight or flight, your adrenaline starting to pump, is that therefore breathing deeply, slowing down your breathing helps to calm down that whole system. And it's something that you can kind of do in the middle of a meeting. It's just, people don't have to know that you're doing it. Also, sometimes changing posture is that often is that when we're feeling overwhelmed, either we might become very tensed, and so we might need to, or we kind of slump down. And I was coaching a new manager a number of years ago, and he was fine about managing his team. It was dealing with the other managers, and when he would go to the management meetings, he as he was describing what would happen in the meetings, is that he became more and more, he slumped more and more in his chair. And I said, can you see what's happening here? And I said, is that what happens in meetings? And he kind of went, well, yes, actually. And of course, what he's trying to do is get smaller and smaller without thinking about it, is that I can't run away, so I'm just going to become smaller and smaller. And so that sometimes changing your posture can put you in a more, centered place. Looking up very briefly accesses your visual cortex and enables you, one is to think more positively, but also to visualize the future. So if you're on your own working and you're kind of head in hands like, oh my God, I don't know how, sorry, put my thingy up and you won't be able to hear. I don't know how I'm going to, get this work done, is look up and go, okay, let's visualize how I'm going to handle this. What are my priorities? It completely, I would say we've got the expressions down in the dumps. We also have the expression chin up. I think there's no coincidence, because when we look up, we access our visual cortex. It's almost impossible to have a negative emotion while looking up, because our eyes and our brain, it needs to come down to focus on a different part of our brain. We do it quite naturally if we're trying to stop ourselves from crying. And I once said this to a group of burly area managers. They all look like bouncers, I tell you. And one of the guys said to me, "Oh," he said, "I was at my father's funeral 2 weeks ago." And he said, "I hadn't realized that's what I was doing. I spent the whole time looking at the ceiling." And that's what I was doing, was stopping myself from crying. So we do it naturally, but we can also do it consciously. So let's move on from the brains and to looking at our mood. And our mood is driven by our thoughts. And so if you stop and think about yourself right now, what thoughts are going through your head? Maybe you're 100% focused on me. That would be wonderful, but I'm not naive to know that the human brain gets distracted. Is you might be thinking, well, I'm getting a bit hungry. What am I going to have for lunch? Which is quite a neutral thought. You might be thinking, whoa, I've got a holiday coming up or something nice at the weekend. Or you might be worrying about something. Those effects and those thoughts affect our mood. And then that has an impact on our mindset, on our behavior, and how we communicate with other people. And so I get clients to use this mood map, and there is a copy of it in my book. You can purchase it from me. But then there's more about mood management also in the book. But to do this mood map each morning and to check in with themselves is to check off maybe, 3 or 5 moods that they're feeling right now. And then the exercise is about what are the thoughts behind the mood. So if you are feeling panicky about something, it's not that you're panicky, because unless there's somebody in the room who's about to, I don't know, do something awful to you, it's in your head. It's the thoughts that are creating that panic. Or if you're kind of feeling, oh, just so gloomy about things, is it will again be thoughts. It might be thoughts about the world or your life or whatever else is going on. So, and so I get for the negative moods is people to look at the thoughts behind and then challenge and think about what is a different way of looking at things. And to do this regularly. And it's certainly something that I used to do on uh, on a very regular basis when I was moody, miserable, Melanie, because I needed to kind of check in with myself and to in order to be able to understand myself better, because I think that often we get a headline mood, and so that headline mood might be anxiety, or feeling lonely, or whatever else it might be. But actually, there might be a lot of positive ones going on as well. And I remember doing this, one of my clients who did this, one of the realizations he had was he was downgrading the positive um, uh, low energy. He was thinking that somehow they were negative compared to the high energy. And I said, but we can't be in high energy positive the whole time. We'd just be manic. We need those calmer, those feelings of contentment and satisfaction, just being relaxed, is we need that part, in part of our lives, is that otherwise it will be exhausting. And I think sometimes when people run on adrenaline, it's the negative emotions, but also is that they can then get very hyper about everything and very excited about things, but actually they can crash and burn very quickly, because if we're running on adrenaline, it's not a healthy energy. So I just noticed a lot in the chat box, Julia. Anything that
Yeah, lots of just comments saying how useful it is. Somebody said they feel like they have lots of tabs open in their brain at any one time. The Apple Health app apparently has a mood tracker that prompts you to check in with yourself a couple of times a day, in a similar way to this as well. So yes, yeah. So
Yeah.
lots of contribution, lots of thoughts.
Yeah, and there's one of the apps that I recommend is which actually was recommended to me by a client. She said, "Oh, I use it used to be called the Thought Diary app. It's now called the Clarity app." And what it's based, why I like it, it's based on CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. So you can do a mood check-in with it, but another part of it is analysing your thoughts. So you can write in whatever your thought is right then. Then it gets you to classify it under about 10 different CBT categories, like mind reading or catastrophizing, or, you know, and various other things. And then it gets you to challenge. So it says, what is another way of thinking about this? And so you write that in, and then it asks you again, what's, you know, another way. So it's getting you to challenge your thoughts, and my clients find that incredibly useful. So so that's definitely one to use.
The psychologist, you're seeing the app, and it reflects your you know, your wisdom, your knowledge, your you know, qualities as a psychologist. It's something that does resonate with you, so it's, you know, they're coming at it correctly with their
Yeah,
analyzing of the sentence. Okay, brilliant, wonderful, thank you.
and I think that that, you know, CBT can be incredibly helpful for people. But also I've met clients who've done CBT in the past and then forget about it. But even if you don't know anything about it, this app really is incredibly useful. So I just want to now kind of summarize, and then if people have got questions about things, is hopefully, you know, it's and you probably are already aware of it, that your business performance is linked to your personal performance. And I think it's very important is to look at and really dig deep about what stops you from thriving at work and in life. Is that, you know, sometimes there's this, you know, there's the obvious things, but often, and this is where coaching can come in use, and be useful, is the real kind of deeper things within you, that can stop you from thriving. Think about the zone of optimal performance. Is that, you know, if you're in the zone, but maybe you're right at the top, or there, you know, there were quite a lot of people who are in the demotivated or the overwhelmed, is, you know, really think about something that you can take away in the next 24 hours to put into action. And rather than just have a whole list, that's great if you've got a list, but do something in the next 24 hours. I always set my clients up for success is, you know, start off small, rather than have massive actions and end up doing nothing. So start off with one thing at a time. Focus on your circle of influence, rather than just, you know, worrying about or getting angry about things in your circle concern. Remember the different techniques to dampen down your brain's threat response. Look at the thoughts behind your moods, and challenge any negative thoughts behind any negative moods, and think about more constructive ways of dealing with things. So that's all I'm going to cover at the moment. Is that what I was going to say, and I think that so yeah, so next 24 hours, think about something to do in your circle of influence. If you, and I think Julia's going to maybe put in the chat box, is I have Melanie's Monday motivational messages covering a whole lot of different topics. So if you'd like to sign up for those, I also sometimes do free webinars. I offer a free coaching audit for individuals who like to discuss how my coaching can help them. You can buy directly from me, Master Your Inner Critic, a book, Release Your Inner Wisdom, £99, not £99, £9.99, including postage and packaging. I have got, I have an 8-week online, it's a video-based course called Being and Doing, Changing from the Inside Out. And what that does is that each week covers a different topic, and within the week you get 2 videos and a workbook. There's a different theme each week, On Wednesday, you get more inspiration, and on Friday, you have fantastic Friday emails, so that you learn a different technique to debrief and learn from your week, so you can end the week on a high despite whatever's been going on. And the next one is starting on the 3rd of June. So any questions, I'm happy to answer.
That was absolutely incredible. Thank you, Melanie. So much to digest and process. But thank you again, Melanie, and thank you everybody for joining us. Have a good rest of the day, everybody.